Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, joined with the normal Wednesday crew, Durst, Owen, Bill. Durst, you're fresh off the golf course. What did you shoot?
Well, I never actually totaled up because it was so bad. It was so high. So, I actually did keep score, but at the end, I never, put the math together. It wasn't a very good thing.
Durst, you use the honor system when you're out on the course, man. If anybody saw my cards while they were out there, they would think like Tiger Woods reincarnated was out there. Like I'm getting, 2 shots on a par 5 and people are looking at me crazy.
Cool. And Owen, it's good to see you on a Wednesday, and I think I'm going to see you again tomorrow night. How are you?
Yeah, good. Tomorrow's going to be safeties and corners. I'm just getting on after watching the New Heights podcast with Taylor Swift. So I got a whole bunch of podcast material flowing through me right now. I'm ready to now input it into this podcast specifically. But I just got off watching that, and for some reason I go and watch that podcast and with my wife, and then I try to hop on Twitter to see what everyone's talking about. And I've been mysteriously signed out of my Twitter on all my devices. So not sure what's going on with that, but I think someone's trying to secretly come in and steal my takes and try to get on the podcast in my place. Well, why is that so funny, Bill?
It was me. Our constant quarterback disagreements. I said, nope, we're done. I'm signing you out of everything. And now you got to figure it out. But no, I'm here with Durst and Owen. I'm glad to be here with you guys on Wednesday night. We're gonna do something a little different tonight. We're gonna do the impact of the whole second round guarantee process and how it could impact future NFL drafts. Obviously, it's a little different from the norm, but to give some context, so this past season, this past 2025 draft cycle, the top 7 of the top 8 picks in the second round got their contracts fully guaranteed. Obviously, the one glaring omission is Quinshon Judkins, who has yet to sign due to legal issues. But it's a stark contrast from the year before when you look at those second round picks didn't get fully guaranteed deals. And what a fully guaranteed deal does from an impact standpoint is really only impacted in 2 key areas. The first one, from an ownership standpoint, when you fully guarantee a deal, you have to put a portion of cash in an escrow to pay out the guarantees of that deal, whatever it may be. The second component is if the player is released from their contract, at that point, they're still owed the money. You still have to pay them unless there's an offset language somewhere in that given contract that says, hey, if you get picked up on waivers or you're signed somewhere else, your new employer has to foot the bill. We don't. You look at just the previous year, for example, you look at the 40th overall pick. Let's look at Cooper DeJean versus Tyler Shuck. The guarantee was about a $3 million difference. The Shuck got his deal fully guaranteed. Cooper didn't. There's about a $3 million difference there. One of the things that gets tossed around a lot, and the basis of this podcast, is how will teams look at that going forward? If I have to pay a fully guaranteed deal, and I'll just use some numbers from the 33rd overall pick, if I have to pay my 33rd overall pick a fully guaranteed deal of $11.8 million, and let's say I have to put 50% of that into an escrow, that's $6 million. That's $6 million check that I have to cut and hope that this player that I'm taking is either healthy enough, talented enough, or smart enough to last the life of that contract. Last the life of that contract, which is a 4-year deal. One thing that I would think about, and this goes more for what I like to call the cash poor teams of the NFL, the Green Bay Packers, who don't really have an ownership, the Pittsburgh Steelers with the Rooney family, the Cincinnati Bengals, are they going to be willing to take a swing on a player that has an injury concern? You have a player that fell out of the first round because they have an injury concern, like a Benjamin Morrison from this past cycle, had hip injury concerns. Are you going to be willing to say, hey, I'm going to foot a $6 million check for a player that may or may not see that entire contract? But Owen, what's your kind of thoughts on this? Where are you kind of standing on this one?
Yeah, I've kind of bounced back and forth, especially between including the injury part of it. And then you can also parlay that, and we could probably get deeper into this later in the podcast, how that can also, the similarities between drafting an injured player and the question marks around that, and drafting some of the more like high talent, low floor players specifically, and how those are kind of both similar situations where you have teams that they're going to be drafting a player that you take a swing on, hoping that the talent level matches the value in the contract that you're putting into the account, because you want this player to give you that reward. And the whole objective of drafting players, especially early on, is to get cheap labor on your team that outperforms their value. And then once you get to the point where you have to then pay that labor to market standard, you can either replace them with cheaper labor, or they've earned such a core role in your team that it's worth paying them that money. So when you see teams that trade away players before the rookie contracts are up, or they don't renew a rookie contract, that often means either that player was someone they viewed as replaceable enough with more cheap or replaceable level talent, or they weren't succeeding or living up to the contract and they didn't feel like having to pay that out. Like we talked about, where there's clauses in the contract where you get moved, you're no longer on the hook for those specific cash that you already owe the player. So you could definitely see a team that is cash poor or is not wanting to invest that amount of money up front to players that have yet to play a down of football in the NFL and are anything but a confirmed asset specifically. And I think the draft in general is that where you're going to see that there are players like it's all magic beans. It's all just what do you think these players can project to be for your team? But I do think that this trend towards giving more guaranteed contracts, especially the second round players, is going to push down players who have injuries and who are more raw. And you're going to see players who are kind of more safer bets, but maybe have lesser upside or are healthier. But in the cost of that is going to be like they're not as good of prospects as the players that fall, because you're giving up some of that boom or bust for more of a guarantee to make your dollar worth it.
So, Durst, I have a question between Savon Ravel, Benjamin Morrison, and Will Johnson. How high were those three players in your board last draft cycle?
Ooh, so Will Johnson was high. Like I'm not too sure. Let me see if I might be able to pull it up real quick. But I mean, I think I still had him like 12th or something like that. So Will Johnson, I was still pretty high, and I didn't think his character concerns were as great. I feel like I maybe had Benjamin Morrison and Savant third round or borderline like second, third. And I think Benjamin's was the one that probably bothered me the most because it was like multiple different injuries. It wasn't just one. Where the East Carolina guy had like the one torn ACL, but it was like September or something like that. So I knew he was going to get on the field probably a little bit sooner. So I think it's probably like first round for the Will Johnson, and then second and third. But testing my memory, man.
So Benjamin Morrison went to the Buccaneers. Is he playing in the preseason right now? Like, do we know, is he on the field?
From what I gathered, he was healthy. I don't know if he played in their first preseason game. But I mean, just to add some context too, I had a first round grade on Ben Morrison and Will Johnson. And both of them obviously had different concerns. Will Johnson's was medical. Ben Morrison's was medical as well, but they were both kind of different medicals. Will Johnson was more of a knee issue. And then obviously Ben Morrison's more of a hip degrading issue. So it is concerning. Let me see. So I don't have any snaps for Ben Morrison in their preseason opener. So I don't believe he played in their preseason opener, but by all accounts, he's trending in the right direction. I would probably fully expect to see him this week in week 2 if he's healthy enough to go. I know Will Johnson, obviously there's been clips from Arizona's camp. Will Johnson's been out on the field, been playing well as well. So I think the question, and Owen, you kind of hit on this too, not only just injury, but like boom or bust prospects. In the past, historically, the second round and really that first half of the second round, really pick 33 to like 45-ish, was where teams could take prospects that they felt weren't worthy of a first round pick, but had enough talent to say, hey, I'm willing to throw a flyer on this guy. Even though he went in the first round, that's like a Shamar Stewart type of range where you have a guy who's got some really good talent, some really good ability, but you're not sold on him as a first round prospect. It's also where you would find a quarterback that's got some flaws. It's the Derek Carr range. You know, you have a guy like Derek Carr who isn't quite that first round talent at quarterback, but you still need to take one early. So now you've got a Derek Carr and Andy Dalton. You know, those are the types of guys you take in that top half of that second round. And now are we going to see teams say, yeah, I'm willing to fully guarantee a contract for Derek Carr, for a Andy Dalton, for a Tyler Shuck?
Well, I think statistically speaking, most second round picks are with the team that drafted them 4 seasons later.
I was going to ask that. I was going to, you know, without looking at the numbers or anything, I would think that like 90% of second round picks probably do make it through the 4th year. You know, they may be on the bench, they may not be starters or whatever, but in terms of like just making it through their contract, I would think, just guessing, it would be like 90%. And
yeah, if you look at like the 2021 class that just finished their rookie deals, there were only really 5 players that were cut early. 4 of them were in that 4th and final season. So if you want to look at like a second round pick that was cut before they're even their 3rd year, you'd have to go back to like 2017 to Malik McDowell when he was cut because he never played a snap for Seattle.
Motorcycle accident or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a preseason ATV accident.
Yeah. So this would actually, so let's take that motorcycle accident as an example, right? So if a player, unless there's language in the contract about you have off-field something that voids the guarantees, the team's on the hook for that money, right?
Yeah, especially because of the guarantees. Yeah. The point of the escrow account is so that way you can't, as a team, because the CBA says, okay, you're on the hook for this amount of money that is guaranteed, and then you cut or move on from a player, and since you have not then given that player, it's a different number of signing bonus. Signing bonus is, here's a check for amount of money, give it to the player, he cashes it, he's already got that in his bank account. The guaranteed money is part of like the cap hit and the average annual value he gets every year. They give it to the escrow account, which is the third party that holds onto that money. So the check is cut out of the owner's bank account, but doesn't immediately go into the player's bank account. And that becomes where they control this distribution of that money to ensure that the ownership or the team can't then screw over the player and not give them money to try to have an element of control. So that money is out of the owner's hands, but not yet in the player's hands. But it's guaranteed to go to the player by that third party.
And essentially, an escrow account, if you've ever hired an attorney, an attorney's retainer goes to an escrow account. It's more or less the same concept. Right. So just depending upon, let's say, where your accounting brain is.
Your money's in purgatory.
Yes. I like that. Escrow is like purgatory for your money. I like that. So I was thinking, like, when I saw the second round guarantees and I saw the issue where a lot of the guys weren't signed. I think the first 2 second round picks, it was Schlesinger and Higgins signed, but then the next 30 did not. And that was kind of how I brainstormed the idea for this podcast. And I was like, well, if players were injured, would we take them in round 2? Because it feels like if you have to, unless you can put in the offset language, like Bill said, where it's guaranteed except for pre-existing conditions or motorcycle accidents, right? Because NFL players don't have such a thing as a pre-existing condition, right? That's only with my employer's health care. That's not with an NFL player contract, right?
Right. And that offset language typically is when any money guarantee, if a player is cut, that offset language will diminish. So what will happen is if the player's cut and they're claimed on waivers, the new team assumes the remaining guaranteed money, whatever's left to be paid out. But if he goes unclaimed, the original team gets relief from the contract any player signs within that time. So if he goes on waivers, he's claimed off waivers, that team assumes the entirety of the debt. Whereas then if he clears through waivers and then he signs a new 2-year, $2 million deal with a new team, then that $2 million is deducted from what team A actually owes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but so we were talking about kind of the pre-existing kind of conditions for some contracts. I don't think this is a thing with rookies specifically, but I don't think this is something that is specifically, maybe one of you guys can correct me, that is outlined in the CBA that this is a thing that can happen. But I feel like going back to the Martavis Bryant situations or other players where like they had repeated offenses, there have been times where like they basically like everyone is all but saying they're on a zero tolerance policy where there's either something baked into the contract, whether it's maybe you can't write in a clause saying if you get, in Martavis Bryant's case, back when marijuana was illegal in the league, that if you get caught with marijuana again, you avoid all your money. That may not be a clause that they can legally put in because of the CBA, but there could be a situation where you structure the player's contract to be the guarantees aren't, you don't basically have any guaranteed money, and you prevent that. And that becomes where, okay, so now that's your zero tolerance. We cut you. You don't have that access to that money. We would have given you guaranteed money, but because you had these previous infractions, we're going to give you a zero tolerance contract with no guarantees. Now with rookies, it's difficult. So go back to the Benjamin Morrison example. His issue was he had this hip injury that was rarely seen in cornerbacks, and corners rely heavily on their hip fluidity to play, especially in the NFL. And while Morrison has recovered, and according to the Bucs early on in their camp, he was fully recovered from the hip injury, he's now out again with a hamstring injury. So the issue comes that you're not allowed to put that wording into a contract, especially with these rookies, because Morrison got hurt, and if the wording of the contract was we're not going to, or you have this money guaranteed unless an injury occurs because we're worried about you as an injury case, then he gets injured with a different injury. So then now what's the wording? Is the wording going to have to be you can't suffer the same exact injury, or we can't? There's a lot of minefields that come up, especially with players who get to play in the NFL and have set standards for themselves, but it was at a different level of competition where if they try to come up and teams try to put restrictions on the guaranteed money that are baked into the CBA contracts because of that agreement they've made with the Players Association, it's hard to then work around that with some legalese that also stays within the boundaries of what's legal within their agreement they've made.
And remember, all these rookies are coming straight out of the NFL Combine, which is the most thorough medical evaluation that a person can pretty much have. So if they get red flagged for 7 different injuries or whatever, because at some point in time, we found a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I mean, there's no, you can put all those things in a contract, I think, because basically everybody's coming into NFL with some sort of pre-existing condition. If we count like the knee that happened freshman in the year, the ACL that happened sophomore year, this one shoulder back in high school, and
I think the conversation with it surrounding injuries is interesting because when it comes to injuries and the risk that you assume by drafting a player who has a pre-existing rap sheet of injuries, it then becomes balancing that versus the talent level you saw on tape and their fit for your roster. Like if I have Will Johnson on the board, and yes, he has his toe injury and there was another knee injury that people were worried about. Like, yes, I'm going to be worried about that persisting, but also the talent I see on tape, at what point do you draft him and bank on the talent versus him not repeating those freak injuries? So I think there you have less of a question about the guarantees with that then, because yes, the injuries may play a part of him not making it through the end of the contract because he's just physically unable to play. But I think the talent can sometimes make you overlook that, whereas the injuries, but also I think it more so sits on the talent when it comes to this player. We're going to draft this player, like we think his highs are super high, but like there's also a chance he flames out within the first 2 years of our contract because he has such a low floor and we're not confident that he can come out. Like he has first round talent upside, but we don't think he can touch that in a specific future. That might be where you're coming into issues of like, okay, we don't want to guarantee him the money because he's such a volatile prospect. So I think there may be some more tap into when it comes to like film grades and the structure of how a player's talent lies within their skill set, which impacts it a bit more with the guarantees than, say, an injury. Because like we saw that with Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart has all this high athletic upside, and the floor, he had 4 career sacks in college, and the Bengals wanted to structure him in a contract that wasn't typical with the first rounders, which are always all guaranteed and are specifically worded in a way that basically ensures that they're going to be on your roster with that under that control, unless something like outside of the realm of normalcy happens. But Shamar Stewart is one of those players where it's like we projected him from top 10 to out of the first round because he was so volatile of a prospect. If that guy landed in the second round, that may be a situation where you like him in the top of the second round. But if these are the guys who are getting the fully guaranteed contracts, maybe you trade back and hopefully he lands you later on because, yes, the talent is there, but he also has the bottoming out possibility that maybe you don't want to go for that fully guaranteed contract in those first 10 or so picks of the second. Wait till the middle or end of the second and see if he's still there, because then now the talent matches the volatility along with the factor of the guaranteed money.
Yeah, and the other thing too is when we talk about the negotiations of guaranteed money, we also talked about the negotiations of scenarios where the guarantees are going to void. And most common ones, are what they call the non-football injury, which is like you're performing dangerous activities like skydiving or suspensions for personal conduct policy violations. There's also some team-specific things that, some teams will negotiate, whether it's like failing a physical or what we saw with Shamar Stewart. It's language that's commonly used around other teams, but the Bengals just didn't use it and now tried to make Shamar the first one to use it. Eventually, they negotiated it. So the conversation is if you're a team, and you're an ownership and your GM and maybe you've had a history of injuries at a certain position, let's say corners, for example, you had a history of injuries with corners. You've had corners that just can't stay healthy and you're trying to figure it out. Is that a position where when you go in to negotiate these second round contracts and you take a corner at the top of the second round, you say, hey, we've had this past pattern. We're going to negotiate this language into our deals. And teams are going to say, oh, well, I know team X is going to go with that language. And maybe it's something where we even see a prospect potentially say, hey, I don't want to go play for X team because I know they have that language. It could get to that slippery of a slope. And I think it's and you talked about it too with grading. I think teams are now going to, especially at the top of the second round, they're going to lean heavily more on their scouting grades and on those grades, because when you have to fully guarantee a $12 million deal over 4 years, that may not sound like a lot. It's $3 million AAV, but that's still $12 million fully guaranteed that you have to cut an escrow check for. So now it's not like, oh, well, I really like that player when he played X team. Let's take him in the second round, see if he develops. Now it's okay, well, I have a guy that I had a first round grade on. I was willing to take with my first round pick. I'll take him with my second. So they have to be more solidified in that second round grading. And I think eventually down the line too, obviously, as we guaranteed, like we talked about at the top of the hour, the first 8 picks in the second round, aside from Quinshon Judkins, were fully guaranteed. And then the guarantees slid down from there. We may get to next year and already those first 8 are automatically locked into guarantee. We could see the next 8 lock in, and we could eventually get to a point 5 years from now where the whole second round is fully guaranteed. And then now we're talking about third round guarantees and kind of where does that buck stop?
Well, I think the buck stops when the percentage of players that play 4 years drops. So some of the points that were made earlier in the podcast. So second round contracts, for the most part, have been guaranteed for 3 years for a really long time. So the 100% guarantee was really the 4th year. The first 3 years had been guaranteed, and I don't know how far back, but my understanding, like looking specifically at TJ Graham for Buffalo, they were basically saying, well, the first 3 years are going to be guaranteed. We're really only arguing over the 4th year at this point, because historically the contracts have been guaranteed for 3 years for a really long time. And that's where to your point, Bill, I think the slippery slope, round 3 picks flame out quite a bit. I think we could each pick a team and say, wow, that 3rd round pick didn't last very long. Right? Like that happens a lot more than it does for 2nd round picks. But what do you guys think?
Well, since I'm kind of more of a draft guy than an NFL contract, I think the part that interests me a little bit is if the value of 2nd round picks becomes less because of this relative to say 3rd round. So are NFL teams more likely to want to trade out of the 2nd round to avoid this? Or conversely, does it make 1st round contracts more because you get the 5th year option and maybe just a little bit more team control? So, where a lot of times a lot of teams like to trade out of the back of the 1st round for maybe a team that wants to move up for a quarterback. Does that change the equation or the math in terms of the value of the 1st round pick relative to seconds and the value of the 3rd round pick relative to seconds? What do you guys think about that at all?
I have an interesting perspective on that. So me and Jim are Bills fans, and in the 2024 draft, the Bills traded back out of the end of the 1st round, which they went on record that they said that they would have drafted Keon Coleman with that 32nd pick, but they decided to trade back, allow Carolina to jump up to get Xavier Legette, so they had that extra year of control on Legette's contract. And the Bills took Keon Coleman just up 1 pick later, which is when they were comfortable taking him a pick earlier, but it was for now $3 million cheaper, according to this is to 2025's numbers. So I can probably go back and check what Keon Coleman actually made less than if he was picked 1 pick earlier, a couple hours earlier in his life. He would have been making X amount of more millions of dollars. But so they were already saying, like, okay, we're going to sacrifice that 1 year of extra control with the 5th year option to take a player because he's cheaper on the cap in general. And I think when it comes to now that the 2nd round picks, because that was also a thing you could think about, is like, okay, in a scenario where that first pick of the 2nd round in Keon Coleman was not fully guaranteed, then you're also not only trading out of the 32nd overall pick to lower his cap hit, but you're also taking it so it's less guarantees. But I'm pretty sure his contract was fully guaranteed. I think you might see more incentive for teams to trade out of the 1st now once 2nd round picks become fully guaranteed, because you're not the money value there isn't losing, except that you're paying them less in general. You may lose that 1 extra year of contract control, but there's not the drop off where before it was probably more valuable for them to trade out of the 1st to the 2nd because there was the less guarantees. Now that there is all guarantees, the value isn't really increasing there, and you might want to see teams stick and pick in the 1st round more, or if they're trading back into the 2nd, it's not as big of a difference. Whereas now I think you're going to see a lot that kind of stays similar, but then like you were saying, the 2nd round picks are now going to be the hotspot of where you're trading back to the 3rd, picking up later round picks in mass, because now you have, yes, cheaper players, less talented players in theory, but the contracts are specifically not going to be those fully guaranteed ones, and you're not labored into that money as much. So it's going to be a lot more valuable to either stick and pick at the top of this 2nd or end of the 1st, and picking at the top of the 3rd as opposed to the mid to the late 2nd.
I think also too, and I'll play the flip side of the coin. I think you're going to start to see teams that know that they have had history with certain positions be more apt to move up. If I am a GM, and let's say I'm Cleveland and I know I've had a history of linebacker injuries, knock on wood for Carson Schlesinger, but I know JOK's had an injury, and then, I have a linebacker retire, and I've had this rash of linebacker concerns, and there's a guy at linebacker at the 21st, 22nd overall pick. Maybe I package that 2nd round pick. Maybe I package the 33rd pick and I go up and get him, because I know I'm going to have to guarantee the full 4 years, whether I take him at pick 23 or pick 33. But I can guarantee that, hey, this is a guy who I've evaluated who's worthy of that 23rd overall pick. And I can say I'm going to go get him because I know that he would be worthy of it, rather than waiting for him to come to pick 33, where I have to guarantee it anyway. And then if he falls, now I'm kind of stuck over a barrel and still have to guarantee it for a lesser linebacker on my board. So I think you could play it both ways. I think it also kind of depends on other factors too. Obviously, one of the things that isn't talked about enough is strength and conditioning coaches in the NFL are able to help alleviate some of the injury concerns, because, it's a professional environment, it's professional trainers that know these players. But if you're a team that, and we get it every year on the NFLPA report cards, if you're a team that ranks as a C-, D+, F for strength and conditioning, you're going to see more injuries. You're going to see more concerns. So now you're going to see teams say, okay, well, we have more injuries. We have more concerns. Let's either go up into the first round and get a cleaner prospect, or let's just get out of the second round entirely and not have to deal with it. They're going to be more apt to move. I think we're going to see some more volatility from that movement in that second round too.
I do think seeing more second round picks traded, I do think that that's real. Right, because especially for this year, like Bill, did you say it was like 7 of the first 8 had guaranteed deals?
Yeah, so it would be from pick 33 to pick 40 were fully guaranteed, except for pick 36, which was Judkins. So it's Schlesinger, Higgins, Emanwari, Savanea, Travion Henderson, Luther Burden, and Tyler Shuck.
So I think there's a couple elements you have to figure out when you're trading down from out of the first to the second. It used to be that you would factor in the jump from fully guaranteed to not fully guaranteed. Now we're talking about how that's going to be changing. I think it doesn't matter where you're trading back from, this is going to stay true. There's probably 4 factors, and this is the first factor specifically with the first round is going to be like, what do you value more, or how do you rank these factors? The extra control with the 5th-year option, the bump down in pay as the further you drop down in your draft order, because like I was saying, in 2025, the 32nd overall pick was getting $14 million as their contract fully guaranteed, and the 33rd pick was $11 million. So you're getting an extra $3 million of cap space, drafting one player one pick later than the other, but you're losing that 1 year of control. The drop in talent, and then it's when you're moving down from the second or to the third, or the second to the seconds that aren't as guaranteed, that is being a factor too. So like the control with the 1st year or the 5th-year option, the drop in talent, the drop in cash allocated or cap space spent, and the drop in the guarantees in general on the contract. How do you value those 4 factors, and how do you rank them makes you probably more keen to trade down. If I value not having that fully guaranteed contract more so than the talent, I'm going to be trading out of those fully guaranteed contract spots a lot more often. The team that just needs talent and is okay with putting that extra cap space or putting that fully guaranteed money in on those contracts specifically. So that might become more of a factor for these trade down and trade up opportunities, as teams have different ways they view based on what their ownership is, their cash spending allowance, how that's going to be dictating these trades going forward, as opposed to in the past where once you hit a certain point, the contracts and the guarantees didn't really matter as much. It just became talent or injury or whatever we're talking about as they are as prospects. Now there's going to be a lot more of the financial and contract control manipulation side of it that's going to factor into these trades.
100%.
And let's add some context. So the 5th-year option, the position where that's the biggest value is quarterback. And it really isn't close, meaning that the 5th-year option on a quarterback is significantly cheaper than the franchise tag for the quarterback. And I was about to go look it up, but I didn't get the Google searches done on my other monitor in time to answer the question. But and I remember like Greg Thompson of Cover One covering this on podcasts many years ago. But meaning, like, if you had to look and, like, you take Keon Coleman, for example, right? Do you pick him at pick 32 or do you pick him at pick 33? Pick 32, you get a 5th-year option. Pick 33, you do not. So the franchise tag value at pick 33 will be like the average of the 10 highest paid wide receivers. The 5th-year option would be slated based upon what it is in the collective bargaining agreement. But the difference in those 2 numbers is negligible, right? Whereas if it's a quarterback, that difference is significant. It could be up to $5 or $10 million a season.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned the 5th-year option too. So there's 4 different tiers when you look at what a 5th-year option could be. You have a basic tier, which is basically the base salary calculated from the average of the 3rd to the 25th highest salary at a position. So like when you look back at like say the 2022 first round class, so Trayvon Walker, Aiden Hutchinson, Trayvon Walker, a basic salary 5th-year option is $13 million. And then and then the next one, there's a playtime escalator where if you meet 75% or greater in 2 of their first 3 seasons, or an average of 75% or greater over all 3 seasons, that kicks it up to the 3rd to the 20th average. So that would put it at like 14.7. And then if they make a Pro Bowl, they're eligible to a transition tag tender, which would be 20 million for a 5th-year option. And then if they make multiple Pro Bowls, then they're eligible to a 5th-year base salary equal to a franchise tag. So that'd be like 25 million. Obviously, different positions, it's going to differ. You look at like Kenny Pickett that year, his basic salary would be $22 million because he plays the quarterback position. So that average of 3rd to 25th salaries is significantly higher than, say, a wide receiver like Chris Olave, where it'd be 15 million. So it's also a position factor as well. And then obviously the big thing too is once the 5th-year option's exercised, it's fully guaranteed. So now you have that conversation of, okay, if I'm going to go into the first round and I'm going to trade up for that 5th-year option, it has to be at a position that I am willing to say I am willing to fully guarantee a minimum of X number of dollars. What's the, and I akin it to a credit card limit. What's my credit card limit? What can I feasibly swipe and put on this credit card and say, yep, I'm comfortable with getting a bill for this much money in X number of years? Is it, and I'll go back to Kenny Pickett because obviously he's in Cleveland now. Am I willing to say, okay, I'm going to trade up for a Kenny Pickett and guarantee a minimum of a $22 million 5th-year option if he doesn't hit the play time? And if he does hit the play time, then now I'm looking at 25 million. And then if he makes a Pro Bowl, heaven forbid, I'm looking at a $35 million 5th-year option, which is where we'll also see teams get more aggressive too in extending contracts before they hit that 5th-year option to help alleviate that cap and cash perspective.
So I don't know if, did you throw out the specific numbers in comparison to the salary cap or to the 5th-year option versus the franchise tag specifically, Bill?
No. So the numbers I have are from the 2022 first round class. That was the ones I dug up for the research.
So I was going to say, to kind of put it in a perspective of like giving specific numbers. So like looking at the 2022 class, because that's the class that was eligible for 5th-year options this past off season, and you look at a player like Xavier Hutchinson, Aiden Hutchinson, who took his 5th-year option and was 20.8 million because he has the 1 Pro Bowl. And if say the Lions wanted to not take that 5th-year option and decline it and just give him the franchise tag for edge rushers in 2025 was 22.5 million. So they're saving an extra $2 million taking a 5th-year option. Then once you extend him, because that 5th-year option is part of that original guaranteed money contract from the rookie deal, you can extend them, spread that cap hit out amongst those future extended years. Whereas the franchise tag is basically, because you can only franchise tag them once their contract is expired, and that keeps them on the roster once they sign that, and it basically becomes a default 1-year contract. You can't then sign them, or you can sign them an extension after, but it becomes a lot more complicated to spread that money out and lower that cap hit for that one season. So for a player like Xavier Hutchinson, it was a no-brainer because it was cheaper for them to take the 5th-year option than to give him the franchise tag. But for example, if he were to have made multiple Pro Bowls, he would have been up. I'm sorry, Aiden Hutchinson. I keep saying Xavier Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson. If he made multiple Pro Bowls, it would have been over 25 million. So they're saving 3 million if they would have not given the 5th-year option and then franchise tagged him. So then that becomes an issue of, okay, if we're not going to give him the 5th-year option, but he's been a guy who's been in multiple Pro Bowls as Aiden Hutchinson has been, we're basically telegraphing we are going to franchise tag you because we like the value on that contract more than the 5th-year option we're going to put out there. So the 5th-year option still has a ton of power when it comes to contract control. And bringing it back around to our main topic with the second round fully guaranteed contracts and not having that 5th-year option tender, the control that 5th-year option gives you may incentivize teams to, okay, I'm not getting that bonus of not having the fully guaranteed contracts in the second round anymore. I'm going to be more aggressive to get into the first round for those specific control elements of the 5th-year option. And then the teams that are going to be trading back into the second are going to be teams that are just wanting to pick up the extra capital. They're not worried about that control because they're kind of – you'll see a lot more of the top end teams making more of these aggressive moves into the first round and have that control. And teams that are just trying to stockpile picks or rebuild be the ones who are accepting those trade backs, where in the past where it was like, okay, bad teams that are trying to add maybe a quarterback with a fifth-year option, or bad teams like you saw with Atlanta this year where they mortgaged futures, they go back up into the first round and get another edge rusher. That might not be the case where it's going to be better teams that are going to be trying to make those more aggressive pushes, with the bad teams not so much being or be more willing to move out of the back end of the first.
I like it. I like it. And Owen and Durst, I'll kick this question over to you guys. Do you think with that fifth-year option concern and teams moving up in trading second-round picks to move up or move back, do you think we're going to start to see more of a premium position? I mean, we already have positional value, right? It's in the NFL. We can't say it's not, because it is. Teams put positional value on certain positions. And Durst, I'll start with you. Do you think we're going to see more of those premium positions taken at the back end of the first round? Or are we going to start to see kind of more of the back end of the first round be offensive linemen, defensive linemen, where the threshold for that play time escalator is lower?
Yeah, I mean, and of course, Jim kind of alluded to with the quarterback contracts and said, by far, that's where you get the best surplus value is at the quarterback position. But as the wide receiver contracts continue to escalate, as the edge contracts continue to get higher and higher and higher, I mean, I do think you probably will see a bigger discrepancy between, okay, we need to get, we need a fifth-year option on this one to ensure we're not, paying, whatever it is, $35 million for this player. I don't know. I'm kind of a trade down kind of guy though. So I mean, this is gonna. I have to kind of process this a little bit. I'm still kind of probably thinking of the term of maybe I want to get out of the second round as opposed to trade up in the first round. And then try to get in the third round and get a guy that I think's falling in the draft, and then maybe even picking up some an extra fourth or an extra fifth for my trouble. And whether or not that might even affect negotiations. If everybody wants to trade out of the second round, then maybe there's a good deal to be had for people who want to get back up into the second round. So if it's if it's an owner with a lot of extra cash that can put in escrow, maybe somebody, I don't know, maybe it's the Dallas Cowboys. I think Carolina, he's got, isn't the Carolina owner the richest one in the NFL right now?
It's the Denver owners. They own Walmart.
Yeah, Denver, but I think Tepper is like top 3. He's up there.
Yeah. So the guys that aren't afraid to spend a little cash, they're like, okay, I'll take advantage of this opportunity. If Cincinnati wants to trade out a second round and get into the third round, I'll go the other direction, zig when they zag.
And Durst, as I was listening to you had inspired a thought, and I have done no research on this, so I have no idea if I'm right. However, the collective bargaining agreement, my understanding is that it expires in 2030. And I believe I got that from an agent that was on the show. So the collective bargaining agreement has negotiated the rookie salaries. And if it's anything like the government, when it gives the raises every year, it doesn't keep up with the increase in league revenue. So we're actually going to see a bigger gap between the fifth-year option and the franchise tag as we get closer to 2030, because the rookie salaries can't go up, but the salary cap is going up.
Yep. Which
means that whatever a player is getting for their fifth or sixth year on a contract they negotiate is going to skyrocket, which would mean that fifth year value for nearly every position group is going to look better in 2030 than it does in 2025. Go ahead, Owen.
I kind of want to run with that point real quick, Jim, and kind of take this to like a doomsday scenario question for the rest of the guys here, where, okay, so in previously to establish how the draft was designed to help teams, it's supposed to be for teams that are bad to get better talent because they have the higher picks in that, and be able to draw or force players to play for them. You don't have to try to draw them in or sell them on playing for your team through free agency. And it was kind of a way to infuse talent to bad teams, make it more parity in the league. now that we're seeing, and I'm saying like worst case scenario now in this doomsday scenario where there are fully guaranteed contracts throughout the whole second round, bleeding into the third round now, is there a future where teams that have these monopolized owners, like the Teppers, like the group that owns the Broncos, like the Cowboys, that have these super high value teams and have owners that have higher amounts of money as compared to owners that aren't willing to spend money? Is there going to be like a kind of Moneyball situation with draft picks like we see in the MLB, where teams who are willing to spend extra money, even on rookies in the draft, are going to now be able to be more willing to go up and get the better talent because they're like, I'm willing to put the money in escrow right now. I have that available funds. And you're going to see teams that don't have that willingness trade down, and there's going to be a perpetual like haves and have-nots of the league, because not only are there teams that are willing to throw money around a free agency able to spend that, but like the salary cap's in place to prevent that from happening. But now it's bleeding into the draft, where if you have extra money as the owner, it can also influence how many picks and higher up in the draft you get, or how many opportunities you get at the better level talent, because they're going to be fully guaranteed contracts. I could see a world where the Bengals don't want to pick a player inside the first or second round at all because they don't want to give that guaranteed contract. Like they may be forced to, maybe, especially in like the first round, because they have that contract control. But I could see a world where we're saying, oh, the Bengals have not picked a second round pick in 5 straight seasons because their owner does not want to invest the money into that fully guaranteed contract. And at that point, create a separation between the teams that are willing to spend that money through the draft and those who aren't, when the draft was originally designed to be a thing to help teams that can't throw money around free agency like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for years, I'm not a big baseball guy, but I mean, I at least peripherally understood that that the Yankees had more money, and the Red Sox had money, and I think some of the the Dodgers and things like that had more money, and so I think you saw more disparity between the haves and have-nots in baseball, and the NFL draft and the NFL salary cap kind of prevented that from happening. Although obviously the Patriots found a way, but for the most part, we didn't really see the same thing happening in NFL that we saw in NBA in LB for a while. Man.
Yeah, I think you're right on there, Durst. It's going to create a vacuum of haves and have-nots, like Owen said, because in MLB you have the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Mets, the teams that are always willing to spend, and then you have the Cleveland Guardians and the Athletics wherever they are, and the Colorado Rockies and the Chicago White Sox, teams that aren't willing to spend. And you're going to start to see a talent disparity. And one of the best things about the NFL is the amount of parity. I mean, every year we have on average 4 to 6 new playoff teams. And if we have this situation where teams like the Bengals or the Packers, things like that, where they don't pick a second round pick because they don't want to guarantee it, you're going to start to see those teams, number one, start to distance themselves, because you're going to have these teams that have the money. And you look at the top 5 ownerships. You have Denver at number 1, Kansas City, Carolina, Seattle, and then the Los Angeles Rams. So the top 5 teams there, they're going to be more willing to pay for money versus a Green Bay or a Cincinnati or a Pittsburgh or a Minnesota. They're not going to be more willing to pay for a second round fully guaranteed deal because they just don't have the cash flow. But the one thing that I think will help them is they may say, okay, we're going to get out of the second round business entirely, and we're going to try to win on the back end, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th round. Oh, and you kind of alluded to it, the Moneyball situation, like with the Athletics and baseball, they won on the fringes, they won in the margins. And I think that eventually it could get to a slippery slope where you see teams like that, teams that say, okay, do not scout any players that we think are worth a top 100 grade. Let's focus on 100 to 200. Let's focus on 100 to 175, because they don't want to run into a situation where they're at the top of the second round and they've got this guy and they really love him, but they just can't afford it. So I think you'll start to see teams kind of invest more on the back end on those day 3 picks, maybe the bigger schools where you got a guy at a bigger school who just hasn't broken out yet, and he's a 4th or 5th round graded talent, and you could say, hey, let's run the risk with him because we don't have to fully guarantee his entire 4 years.
As we were speaking about this, it kind of got me thinking about shout out to a fellow draft professor, David from. He's got a website, Philly Cover Corner. And I was looking at that because I know he's got a lot of information about the draft track records of the GMs, and I couldn't remember if he had anything that maybe alludes to maybe ownership and things like that. I don't really see anything in terms of the ownership, but of course, obviously the GMs, track record when it comes to trades and it's got annual and average annual free agent spending. I mean, there's a lot of super valuable information. So even if it doesn't end up alluding to to what we are focusing on tonight and stuff, the phillycovercorner.com is a great website, great resource for even for those that are not Eagles fans. But yeah, I'm not seeing anything in terms of ownership spending habits and stuff as much other than it alludes to the free agency average annual free agency spent by certain GMs.
Yeah, and the other thing too, and we talk about it because it actually just happened, but the NFL owners voted to allow private equity funds to buy stakes in teams. So now you could have private equity firms being able to spend to get in the game, for example, upwards of 10%. So you think like a company like consortiums like Blackstone and Carlyle, they can purchase stakes in a team, which won't really change too much, but it allows more capital for those cash poor teams, as we call them, the Minnesotas, the Pittsburghs, the Cincinnatis, because they need that liquidity. They can generate that cash infusion for whatever. If they want to pay for a second round pick, they now have a private equity firm that they can then say, okay, I'm going to tap into this pool of money so I can pay that. Obviously the thing is private equity, eventually you could, as an owner, lose control of your team. If you get enough private equity firms together, they can buy the 51% controlling interest that they would then need to own your team. So how much are teams going to be willing to say, okay, I need this private equity firm to come in and be able to pay for these second round picks, but also I don't want them here because it's enough of those equity firms and I could lose my goose egg, as we call it. I could lose my goose egg. So that's the thing that you have to kind of discern is at what point do we say, okay, I don't have enough revenue here, so I've got to invite a private equity firm, but also at the same time, I need to kind of be able to do it with my own checkbook to not let someone else get their hands in my pot.
I'm trying to think of a way, because we were talking about the CBA coming up in 2030, and that's a way that teams could definitely, because they're manipulating what rookie contracts are, and that's the only way that you can really set those. Now, these fully guarantees and things like that, that's part of the negotiation process with the agents. It's not something that's baked into the CBA when it comes to the second-round picks. I'm assuming that's going to be what comes up in this 2030 CBA, where the owner side of it are going to try to find ways to mitigate. By the time we get around to that, I'm assuming that all second round picks are going to be fully guaranteed. And we were just talking about if that's the case, and there's going to be there may be a development of the haves and have-nots based on who has the cash to throw around. I'm trying to figure out what the owner's angle would be to help mitigate that. Is it going to be that they're going to fight hard to lower rookie salaries? Like, we're going to give you fully guaranteed contracts, so we're going to try to make it so that way the value of these contracts are lower than they have been in the past because now they're becoming more fully guaranteed. I don't see the NFLPA taking biting on that in the slightest. So what is the owner's pathway to mitigating that problem? Because now it's going to be like, what is your pathway to attack that where you're already giving up the
yeah. As say, Steve is reading my mind. I think the concession is to get the 18th game because you're talking about an 18th game for all 32 teams. That's going to increase the team's revenue from a TV contract standpoint that allows them to get more cash flow to be able to pay that concession.
Yeah. And Owen, I know that you were in the middle of a thought, but
no, I was trying to finish it, and I think this connects it pretty well. So go ahead, Jim.
Okay. So the goal of an NFL owner is not to win games. The goal of an NFL owner is not to manage their salary cap. If you're an NFL owner, you have one goal only, and that is to make money. It's that simple, right? So my opinion is that the second round guarantees do not impact the owners making money. It impacts the team's salary cap, but it doesn't impact the owners making money. So the owners, to Steve's point, would gladly give the second round guarantees if they get the 18th game, because the 18th game is how the owners make more money.
Bingo.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say a bit of I'm gonna incorporate some of the stuff I actually learned in college. We can apply some of that here. Finally have a way to use it. Because I got a degree in sports management specifically, so it's something that we were taught a lot of this stuff, especially when it comes to how teams generate revenue and what the specific ways they attack it is, and breaking it down by league. So when you add that 18th game, it's adding the major revenue source for the NFL is their broadcasting rights. You'll see a team. Sports like the MLB and NHL specifically rely on their gate numbers to fund their teams and get their revenue through that way. The NFL's over majority of their revenue comes from their game broadcast. So if you're adding that 18th game and you're hoping that mitigates, and I'm not saying that the second round tenders or the second round contracts that are guaranteed are going to hurt the owner's bottom line specifically. Again, that's not going to cause them from being in the red versus being in the green. They're all going to be in the green regardless. It more so is the owner's appetite for taking those punches in the wallet on an immediate signing of that player. And as contracts go up, as the CBA comes up, when the new CBA comes around, they're going to want rookie pay bumps to reflect the salary cap and what the positions are being paid. So these are going to be even more expensive, guaranteed contracts for these second-round players, which means it's going to be an even bigger instant check cut by the NFL owners to sign these second-round players. So the 18th game will, yes, add more revenue to the team, but that's also split revenue between the rest of the league, where those broadcast revenues they get from those games, which is the majority of how the league makes their money, is going to be split evenly between all 32. Whereas, say in the NHL, MLB, adding an extra game, extra couple games in those leagues because they have bigger seasons, those more directly impact those individual teams because those gate numbers that they make are what they make. That's their revenue specifically, and they get to keep all of that. So adding the 18th game is probably going to be what they're going to get out of this, but I think they're going to need to get more to be able to compensate because the CBA is going to want to bump those rookie contracts up. And if we talk about something like what the one comment was where the players union wants all contracts to be fully guaranteed, the NFL side of it, the owners are going to want extra, even if it was just the first day 1 and day 2 contracts up through round 3, all of those contracts are guaranteed, 100+ contracts. Just adding an 18th game is not going to be enough to compensate what these owners are going to have to be, because now they're going to have to pay 3 players a minimum if they have their own 3 respective picks worth of pay cuts right out their pocket, right down there to an escrow account.
Yeah, so Ryan Sparks, I could not disagree with you more on that. Yeah. I disagree with you so much, I'm going to go into a soliloquy.
I was gonna say
Go ahead, Bill.
I was gonna say 2 things real quick. So obviously, if you take the average attendance and times the average ticket price, you're looking at $26 million that you're going to add with an 18th game. You extrapolate that over 32 teams, you're looking at an average of $800,000 each team's going to get an additional gate revenue. I think Ryan is on the right track that the players union should push. They should push for the rookie deals to be guaranteed. But what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to give up 2 things. They're going to have to give up, number one, they're going to have to give up that 18th game. It's going to be a non-starter. It's going to be tabled until they give it up. And then number 2, they're going to potentially have to give up a slice of the pie that they're currently getting. So obviously, with how the CBA breaks down and a certain amount of money is guaranteed to the players, a certain amount of money is guaranteed to the ownership. If the players union is saying, hey, we want all rookie deals to be fully guaranteed, the ownership can say, well, that's fine. What we want is an 18th game, and the current revenue spread, if it's 51-49, it's now going to be 54-46. Yes. Do you want 46% fully guaranteed, or do you want 49% partially guaranteed?
So apparently I'm disagreeing with both Sparks. Okay. So the way that I would look at this is the players union represents the players, and rookies are not technically part of the union till they sign their contract. There's probably a gray area there, But the players union is going to fight for their veterans to get better contracts. Right? The players union wants to see the players at years 5, 6, 7, and 8, which have had a successful career, get the piece of the pie. The players union is not going to fight for rookie 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks to get guaranteed deals. They want that money to go to veterans. And if that money goes to a 7th round pick, a veteran just lost their job. And the union is more in the business of protecting the veterans than getting the rookies more money when they haven't played it down.
Well, Jim, not to get too like combative with you, wouldn't, or not to push back too much, I guess would be the way. Wouldn't the contracts of 5th, 6th, 7th round picks being fully guaranteed, wouldn't that push teams to then like just trade those picks for draft picks or whatever, and then sign veterans that maybe they don't have to sign them to fully guaranteed contracts? Like, would I rather draft a safety in the 5th round and give him a 4-year or a $4 million fully guaranteed contract, or sign a veteran safety who's still on the market come the draft time or past draft in like the summer months, who's going to be fill the same role as special teams depth player, but get him for like $1 or $2 million without having to fully guarantee that. So not only are you getting them cheaper, it's not out of your pocket nearly as much. So if the NFLPA pushes for rookie contracts, which are technically just theoretical players that are going to be in their union, once those contracts get signed, those are players they're representing. They want to get those guys money anyway. But if you push for those assets to now be more valuable to the players and less of a cheap cost for the teams, it would maybe push them more towards veteran options, which may be what the NFLPA is a whole and end up being in your idea there.
So if the player is good enough to make the team, then the contract is guaranteed. But the player shouldn't be guaranteed the money when they're drafted. They should be guaranteed the money when they make the team. That's the distinction. You don't guarantee it at signing. You guarantee it when they make the team. If you make the team, it's guaranteed. I would be able to align to that. But you're not going to guarantee the 5th round pick their entire salary, and for several reasons. So first of all, it would also create a lot of dead cap, right? Because 5th round picks get cut a lot. So anything that was guaranteed, if the player gets cut, becomes dead cap, which prevents the veteran from getting signed. So unless they change what the accounting rules are on the salary cap, Ryan Sparks, I think this is so far from reality that I'd like to know like what you're smoking, because I want some of it too.
I think the one thing too that and we'll circle it back to bring it full circle. Jim, you talked about it, making the team versus fully guaranteed at signing. That could be offset language that they negotiate to the CBA. Hey, going forward, we're going to fully guarantee these rookie deals, but the offset language is that you have to make the roster on the 53 cut down day on X day. When you do that, that is when the money fully guarantees, because then that also gives the owner time, if they don't have cash, to reach out to a private equity firm, bring them in, generate that cash, and then on September 1st, this deal is now fully guaranteed. You have to have the escrow in play. So that's kind of a pathway to get to that point.
There you go. You see him, Bill. When you retire from the draft world, you can become a politician. That was so well done.
And what if you're a 7th or a 5th round guy and you're put on so you're a rookie, but then you put on the
practice squad,
the pup list.
Practice
Yeah,
squad.
yeah. You put on
pup
the pup
list
list is what I was thinking about, but practice squad as well, though. But
You
you're
see,
basically unable to perform list. Yeah.
You see, and that's kind of the issue with any of these rookies getting guaranteed deals, no matter where they're drafted. If you're on the pup, you're still counting against the salary cap, right? Like it doesn't change what money you're receiving until you miss a game, right? Because ultimately, right, if there's 17 game checks. So if you're on the pup, you would still get your bonuses, but you wouldn't get your game check, is what I assume. But my understanding is players on the IR still get their game checked.
Yes, it's part of the offset language that they'll guarantee a portion if you hit IR, or they guarantee a portion. It's not the full amount, but if you hit the IR, you hit the PUP list, you're guaranteed 50% or 30% or whatever that may be. It's kind of like workman's comp, right? When you get paid for workman's comp in your day job, they don't pay you a full paycheck, but they pay you a portion to live on. So I think, and one thing, obviously, this is for a whole nother podcast and a whole nother day, but going to college and all the money that's flowing around in the NIL, versus now here in the NFL that's fully guaranteed. Are we going to see college players say, hey, yeah, I can get a $2 million NIL deal, or I can get a $5 million fully guaranteed NFL deal? And now, where we're in this lull where we're swinging back to underclassmen staying in school, we could swing the pendulum back the other way and see a lot of redshirt sophomores and juniors declare.
Yeah, and ironically, Bill, I was thinking that like 15 minutes ago. I didn't want to interrupt whoever was talking, but I said there's probably another podcast on, does the NIL suggest that we should switch what the first round picks are guaranteed to entice the players to come out more? But we've already been going for more than an hour. So why don't we pause? This has been an enlightening discussion. Bill, do you want to let the fine people know who you are and all of your content that's coming out?
Yeah, so you can find me over on X at Spark Scouting. You can also find me on TikTok, Threads, and Instagram, obviously, as well as Substack. If you search Spark Scouting, you'll see my lovely mug pop up. Also a writer and analyst for the Right Way Sports Network over at twsn.net, covering NFL and NFL draft for all 32 teams. Just dropped my post-summer scouting first round mock over there. People love it. Reviews are great. 5 stars. Ebert and Roper gave it 2 thumbs up. I don't even think they're alive anymore, but they gave it 2 thumbs up somehow. But yeah, you can go check it out over on X at Spark Scouting. You can also find me here on the Mrs. Are Relevant Daily Draft podcast on Wednesday nights with Owen, Wednesday nights with Durst, and you'll see me pop up on a few other nights as well. Next week, you'll see me pop up on a 2-night extravaganza with Randall Slifer, Travis May, and Sam Teets as we go through our top 150 to close out the summer scouting. Owen, where can the people find your lovely content?
Yeah, so you can find me obviously here on the Mr. Relevant podcast, where I'm going to be here all Wednesday nights leading through and up through the college football season starting. We're going to be covering, me and Bill, and eventually me and Newt Weston are going to be covering D tackles and edges as the draft then becomes, we're processing through this college season into the actual draft cycle itself. And if you can't get enough of what I do here, I don't know who that would be, maybe my mother if she's watching, but if you can't get enough of me here, you can also check me out over on my own YouTube channel, the Weekly Huddle podcast, where I have videos going where I have the other draft professors on. I had Bill on to do a 2026 mock draft a few weeks ago. Me and Newt, who I previously mentioned, we're going to be doing a battle of the big boards now that Newt's going to be wrapping up the rest of his player rankings that he's been posting over in the Weekly Huddle. And as well, I just recently launched a Patreon where you can go there, and if you want to get access to my full big board with all the different individual player write-ups, you can get that by doing a subscription through that as well. I'm going to be doing live streams over on Kick because they're a little less lax with their film censorship policies and their copyright over there, where I'm going to be doing live scouting sessions. And if that, you can also find the VODs for those over on the Patreon as well. So I have a couple different things going up. I'm going to start getting into the swing of the live streaming stuff soon. It was going to be this week, but a couple things came up this week specifically, but hopefully next week I'm going to be getting into more. When I'm not posting a video, I'll be alive doing some live scout alongs as well.
Durst.
Yeah, so you can find me on X at Durst NFL Draft. So this Friday, I'll be on the Mrs. Are Relevant podcast with Bill and Anthony Russo talking about our top 50 boards for the NFL Draft. And pretty much every Wednesday, I'll be here usually doing a game preview as we go through the college football season. So I look forward to it.
Yeah. So, couple plugs. So Newt Weston, whose name has been dropped a couple times, he is coming on the Mrs. R Relevant podcast on Sunday. He's dropping his top 100 at 6 p.m. Eastern. So Newt will be here Sunday. Sunday, we also have a tight end show. Durst mentioned Friday night. Bill, Durst, Anthony covering their top 50s. Next week is a big week. Next week, we go to 2 podcasts every weekday. So all of the podcasters, they're back from their summer breaks. We are going to be in mid-season form in August. 2 podcasts I'd like to point out, 8:30 on Wednesday and 8:30 on Thursday. Bill, Sam Teets, Travis May, Randall Slifer are each going to be doing the players in their 150. So we're calling it the Master Watch List podcast. If 4 people show their top 150, my anticipation is that they're going to cover between 200 and 250 players. So those would be essentially the players that 4 very different people have round 5 or better grades on right now. So we're calling that the Master Watch List. It was an idea I came up with. I am honored that Bill, among others, is helping kind of lead that and spearhead that. So Bill, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe, please and thank you. That is the best way for us to trend in front of more people. We can tell that we're trending, but we would like to trend more. That way, we can afford to buy more than these t-shirts. So
We got to keep the lights on somehow.
yeah, got to keep the lights on. But that being said, we have been going here for more than 70 minutes. Oh, there we go. And then Owen is throwing on his
It's too hot to actually wear it, but I'll wear it like this.
Yeah, Owen wants more swag, so hit that subscribe, please and thank
100%.
you. So we will see you on a podcast again tomorrow. So actually tomorrow we have 2 podcasts. You'll see Owen at 7 o'clock doing a corner and safety reaction show, right? It's corners and safeties tomorrow?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Owen, Steve, who's in the chat right here, Taylor, doing a corner and safety reaction show. So it'll be Owen's first watch on a lot of the players. Taylor's watched some of them and not. And then Steve will be, some of those will be his first watch as well. And then tomorrow late, there is another podcast at 9. So with, and I've already forgotten. Oh, it's the linebacker show. There we go. I knew it escaped me, but we are covering the entire linebacker watch list that we compiled over the summer. So for the 87 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thank you for stopping by, everybody. We will see you on a podcast again tomorrow night. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.